you look out upon the sea and you see all these, sort of different shapes that we call waves, right? And if you touch any part, if you look at the sea and you touch any part of the sea, no matter what that sea is like, no matter how we might be characterizing it as calm or rough, choppy, very placid, whether the waves are quite large or basically it's totally flat, there's really very little undulation of that body of water. No matter where you might, if you put your finger somewhere and you touch some part of the sea, it doesn't matter which part of the sea you touch. It doesn't matter which wave you put your finger on, which undulation you put your finger on, you're always touching the sea, aren't you? You're not actually touching. So the idea of touching a part is sort of, we could talk about it like, oh, there, I'm touching a part of the sea. But actually, when you touch any part of the sea, you're touching the sea, because it's one thing, isn't it? It's one singular thing. So, or we could also say, no matter what part of the sea you're touching, you're always touching water, no matter how the water is appearing, right? Your hand is always on water. That's what's most basic about all these forms and shapes that the sea can take, is that they're all made of water. So we could say that similarly with experience, even though we experience this wide range descriptively of a full range of everything from great ecstasy and joy to incredible heartbreak and sorrow and everything in between, that whenever we touch any experience, which is all we're ever touching is experience, in a sense, experiencing experience, we're touching the fundament, we're touching what is the basis of everything, because the basis of everything gives rise to all of this experience. So we're always touching, in the same way that when we're touching one part of the sea, we're always touching water. When we touch any experience, we are touching the basic state. We're touching reality. We're touching God, always. And this is discovering the non-hierarchical nature of our experience. In other words, there's not one experience that's closer to reality than another. There's not one experience closer to the sea of life than another. This is all the sea of life, isn't it? Arising as each momentary state, each momentary appearance, each momentary thought, feeling, sensation, perception, memory, image, all of it, right? All of it is a movement of something. We could call it life, we could call it vitality, we could call it energy, the energy of existence. Isn't it all the movement of that? Isn't everything alive? It's a movement of something. It's really impossible to say what this movement is. It's clearly movement. It's clearly dynamic. What is it a movement of? What is it a movement of? It's a movement of aliveness, a movement of presence, a movement of divinity. So from this perspective, it doesn't matter what you're experiencing. You're always experiencing reality. You're always experiencing the ground. You're always experiencing life. Because every experience is life, albeit in its own particular form. So it's this, in a sense, I'm talking about, we could say, kind of reducing all of this to this common denominator, all of this diversity to some common denominator. It's not a diminishment of it to do that, though. It may seem like, oh, I'm kind of dumbing it down, I'm oversimplifying it to reduce it to, oh, it's all just life, all this unthinkable, rich diversity, which is so amazing. And I'm just like collapsing it all into this singular thing called life. Because the reason it's not really reducing it is it's not like when you see that this is all life, when you feel the reality that this is all the movement of life, all the movement of this energy we call existence, all the diversity doesn't go away, does it? Like right now, I mean, it's like you could see this is all life, and it's not like suddenly it's just like some blank, like whitewashed reality where everything looks the same. It's not like that at all. It still is so colorful and diverse, isn't it? And sometimes the moment feels like this, and sometimes it feels like that. But it's always what is. It's always the presence of what is. And recognizing this is very profound to do, because you can begin to discover that you're never separated from the ground of reality itself. You're never apart from it. And it doesn't only exist in high moments and blissful moments, the ones that feel good. And this is why, one reason why the very, very simple practice that I'll sometimes share of allowing everything to be as it is can be so potent. Because that simple practice of, maybe we'll do that in a moment together, of not trying to micromanage your experience to turn it into something better that you imagine would be better, either more awake, more enlightened, happier, more clear, whatever you think is potentially missing, more full. By allowing it to be as it is, what can be revealed is its intrinsically full, complete, whole, undivided, perfect nature, just as it is. But it's non-hierarchical in the sense that it's present in and as all experience, not just certain experiences. But if we stay in the realm of I'm going to meditate or do yoga or whatever in order to feel something different, to get into a better state, more still, more calm, more relaxed, we can miss this non-hierarchical view, this everything is divinity view, this understanding. But it's difficult to communicate this. That's for sure. As I stumble along trying to convey something that's so beyond words, because our words and our descriptions are constantly reinforcing this idea of difference and distinction and hierarchy, isn't it the case? That this is better than that. Says who? Says the interpretive apparatus of consciousness is who is suggesting that this is better than this, that this is higher than this, that this is more God than this. It's an idea. You know, there's a you know, and a lot of the spiritual traditions, most of them that I've explored from my standpoint, tend to reinforce this hierarchy rather than really cut through it. And you know, one example of that is this idea of what's sometimes called the view or awareness. And awareness is sort of often this kind of privileged space. And then there's all the content and all the thinking and all the interpreting, right? That's the problem you're trying to get away from, because that's right. I mean, that's what's creating all the division and distinction, and the suffering is all the narrative. So I want to find the pure view of awareness that's sort of dispassionately noticing all of the content that can make us so crazy, right? And that's a reasonable approach that can have its own benefits, for sure. I've experienced them myself, but it's for me, it's ultimately misleading. Because why? Because you've introduced yet another hierarchy, which is that, you know, what is aware of the content of of all of this is somehow better than the content. The content is delusion, and the pure, clear view of awareness is what's true. So you have to get back to that clear view of awareness and forget about all that content, because it's, and you've just introduced a whole nother hierarchy, haven't you? So I wrote about this in my last book in one chapter called Resting as the View. And it can sound, when you hear like just rest as the view, you know, just rest as the view of awareness, like that's something I should do as opposed to what I'm doing right now. That's what we think, you know, and that's how it's often taught. Okay, you're not resting in the view now, so now I'm going to tell you how to rest as the view. Right there, I've created a distinction and a sort of a hierarchy. It's better to rest as the view, right? So we're going to meditate together and rest as the view. So here's a little different take on that. And it's very consistent with what I was just sharing about cutting through the hierarchy of experience, okay? Resting as the view. In some traditions, the practitioner is instructed to rest in the view. The view in these traditions refers to that which is aware of every fleeting instant and is often described as an unchanging stability, a vast and spacious clarity within which all experience arises and passes away. Right, so for example, like, and sometimes I'll even introduce the view of awareness to my grad students in the way I just described, because it can be helpful, I found, for them to have an initial introduction to the view in this way. Because they feel very caught up, like most humans do, in the stream of thinking, and they've got worry going on and rumination and negative self-thoughts and self-talk. And then I point out to them that, like, whether you're having positive self-talk, wow, I'm a good person, I have capacity, I feel confident, or you've got negative self-talk going on, I talk about how what's common about that is that there's a knowing, whether you feel great sadness or great joy, there's a kind of a knowing that underlies the sadness or the joy. And that knowing, in a sense, isn't really defined by the sadness and the joy. That's this idea of the distinction between awareness and the content of awareness. And that's fine, again, but I'm talking about something a little bit different here. Based on the way the view is often taught, like I was just describing, we conceive of it as being something distinct from whatever is being viewed, right? So, you know, you're looking at your computer screen. That's the object of awareness, okay? So that's the object there. And then there's the thing that's viewing the object. Let's call it awareness or consciousness, okay? So we just made a distinction there. You feel that right now. There's the object I'm viewing, my computer screen or my phone if I'm looking on a phone, or whatever you're viewing visually. And then there's the viewer or the viewing awareness. That's the view of awareness, okay? That something that's distinct from what's being viewed, the object of perception. However, if we think of the view as some privileged domain, and this is how it's often taught, like the view of awareness is somehow privileged, it's better than what's being viewed somehow. It's clearer, it's less distorted. Some privileged domain, some special state or realm we must first locate and then rest in, we will miss the fact that this very moment is already the view. So in other words, we've made a distinction if the view is something else other than what's here right now. I just had a friend of mine who teaches a lot of stuff around spirituality and awareness, and he interviewed me on his podcast, I don't know, a couple years ago, and we hadn't been in touch in a while. He sent me an email, and he was wondering how I was doing, and then he asked me, he said, you know, lately I've been finding a couple of little things that I say to myself to help me to get into the state of pure awareness. And he said, that's very powerful. Like, I instantly get into the state of pure awareness. And he said, what do you find? What are your little tricks to get yourself into pure awareness? He asked me. And it was very interesting to contemplate the question, because I realized that I completely don't relate to that way of talking about it anymore, even though I once did. And because what it's basically suggesting is that something has to change. In other words, this isn't the pure view of awareness right now. That's basically, because if it was, then why would I have to make a little trick with my mind to get me into the state of pure awareness? So I wrote him back and I said, well, basically, I just don't see it that way. And even though I do all sorts of things to change my experience because I'm human, and I might decide to go take a trip because I want to go explore another place that I think will be enjoyable. In other words, I'm changing my experience. There's nothing wrong with that. But to me, it doesn't have anything to really do with freedom, the kind of freedom that I'm exploring with everyone in these in these calls. So again, he was suggesting there's this hierarchy. There's the pure awareness that, wow, he's really found this way to get into. And I'm like, as opposed to what exactly? Because from the standpoint of what I'm talking about, there's no going from one place to another. There's only going from this to this, or going from this version of this to another version of this. If we think of the view as some privileged domain, some special state, as I was saying, that we must locate and then rest in, we will miss the fact that this very moment is already the view. To be sure, that which is being seen or viewed right now, whatever you're viewing perceptually, is forever changing, for sure, right? But the seeing itself is constant. You're always seeing. Something's always being experienced, always being felt, always being viewed. And so from this vantage that I'm describing, to rest as the view, quote unquote, is simply to see that there is only resting in the view. Only ever the knowing of whatever is being known. The seeing of whatever is being seen. The feeling of whatever is being felt. So again, rather than trying to feel something in particular that you associate with whatever, enlightenment or just happiness, it's about just noticing that all there is the feeling of whatever's being felt. That's entirely different. And that turns out to be, for me, from my standpoint, the real freedom, because it's that which is inclusive of all things, of all moments, of all states, of all experiences. That's what real non-duality, as I understand it, is that which is inclusive of everything. That's the non-hierarchical nature of it. It's inclusive of everything. It is everything. That's why it's inclusive of everything. This isn't, from my standpoint, about finding and then resting in the view, but rather seeing that there is no possibility of ever being out of the view. Resting is not something we do. It's simply noticing that the view is inescapable, ever present as this very instant, and the next, and the next. So we needn't rest in the view, but simply see that the view is present right now as each fleeting moment of experience. Here's one way to think about this very simply. And I'm using a visual kind of an analogy. The view suggests kind of visual seeing the view, but it could also be feeling. It's just another version of the view. So we're constantly viewing something different, aren't we? Even if you're looking at the same view of the scenery of your life right now, this moment, it's changing. It's not actually holding still. It's got its own dynamism. Perceiving is dynamic. But if you, let's say, look straight ahead for a moment, whatever you're looking at, and that's the view, whatever is appearing in your field of, the visual field is the view right now, let's say visual view, right? This is the view. You're resting in the view. This is what's happening, this is the view. If you turn your head, like whatever, 90 degrees, and the view changes, doesn't it? Now you have a different view. But there's no hierarchy. There's just the view, whatever it happens to be. Do you see what I mean? There's just a view, whatever it happens to be, whatever it happens to look like in that moment. And it's always different, isn't it? Close your eyes for a moment. Now the view's different, isn't it? It's a different view, but it's still the view. It is the view of the instant, of the moment. Whatever your gaze may happen to fall upon, know that right there is the view of whatever is present. Rest effortlessly right here in the heart of this knowing, the steadfastness and constancy of the view. This is the paradox, is that the view is always changing, but it's always constant. It's always the view. It's just that it always looks different, but it's always the view. Seeing something, that's the view. Feeling something, that is the view. Experiencing something, that is the view. Feeling something, that is the view. There's only the view. That's all that there is the view. The view of whatever is appearing. So as we just sit here for a few moments, eyes open or closed, this is the view. This is resting as a view. You can appreciate the nature of the view, which is its constant dynamic nature, right? It's not a static thing, is it? The view is, it's like, I think I've said this before, it's like the pictures in Harry Potter, if you ever watched any of the movies, they're moving, you know, they're not still photos on the walls. So you look at a picture of, you know, your grandmother, you know, today's Mother's Day. So if you have a photograph of your mother on the wall, it's like in Harry Potter land, the picture is alive, it's moving. But so that's what our view is like of life, isn't it? It's alive. So just appreciate how alive the view is, but that no matter where you go in the field of experience, there's no escaping. You can't get out of the view. And you can't get into the view because there's only the view of what is. Do you feel that? Do you feel the sense of that? It doesn't matter what you're feeling. If you feel sad, that's the view. If you feel happy, that's the view. If you feel clear about what I'm saying, that's the view. If it's confusing what I'm saying, then that's the view. The view is confusion, what you might call confusion. But it's all just the view. It's all just what's happening. This cuts through the hierarchy of one view is better than another. Oh, you might have preferences because you are human, right? Like I like that view better. You know, I like looking at the Grand Canyon more than I like looking at garbage on the sidewalk or something, right? But they're both the view of that instant, of that moment. So just sitting here together, and there's no need to manipulate the view of this moment, the feeling of this moment, the apparition of this moment. It's like you don't need to manipulate the wave to make it the ocean. In other words, the waves of experience are the view. You don't need to manipulate the waves of your experience to make them more into the view of God, the view of sacredness or divinity or freedom or whatever it is you might say you're looking for. Because the view is appearing as each moment. So the moment doesn't need to be manipulated to make it into the view. It is the view. This is the view, no matter how it's appearing. Eyes closed, eyes open. Everything is it. Everything is the view. There's no escaping the view. There's no getting into the view, no getting out of the view. It's like no matter where you might travel in the field of experience, you are just, in a sense, coming to another view. That's it. But it's always just the view of this instant. There's never two views. There's only ever this view. And that is the view of whatever's appearing in this instant, inexplicably, magically, the view appears, the view of the moment appears. And vanishes to be, in a sense, give room for the next view to appear. The ceaseless dynamism, ever changing, but always the view. So the real relaxation is that you don't have to seek out the view. You don't have to try to figure out how to get into the view. You can relax because this is the view. In other words, the moment is being viewed, isn't it? There's nothing else going on but the viewing of the moment. What else is ever happening but the view of the moment? Your view. No one else's view, your view. How it's appearing. I mean, whether we're trying to view the moment with some kind of clarity or awareness or not bothering at all with that, the moment is being viewed, isn't it? Again, it's what life is doing. Life is appearing, isn't it? And the appearance of the moment is the view. In a sense, awareness is, if there's something we want to call awareness, it's inseparable from the view. It is the view. There's not two things, awareness over here and the view over there. There's just the view. And awareness, if there's something that even exists called awareness, it's inseparable from the view. The observer and the observed, so-called, are one thing. The perceiver and the perceived are one thing. You can't pull them apart. Can't pull them apart. It's one thing. It can be described as an appearance and then a viewer viewing that appearance, but it's one thing, isn't it? Can't pull it apart, can't tease it apart.